every generation of Pokemon has introduced a brand new major mechanic into the game, from Dynamax to Z-moves, all the way to abilities, but none have been as cool as Mega Evolution. So with Megas finally returning in the upcoming release of Legends ZA, I've started to wonder, just what is the strongest Mega Evolution of all time? Let's start with number 10, Mega Gyarados. Everyone's familiar with Sejin Park's legendary Pachirisu that helped him win the 2014 World Championship, but not as many know that Mega Gyarados was the main Pokemon that Pachirisu was there to support. So what made Mega Gyarados so good that it was even worth considering a support like Pachirisu alongside it? Well, spoiler alert, this won't be the only time you hear this in this video, but the first reason is the ability, Intimidate. I don't know how many times I've mentioned this on this channel, but Intimidate is one of the best abilities in the entire game. But that's not all, because after Gyarados lowers both opponents' attack stats with Intimidate comes reason number 2, its base stats. See, Mega Evolution gave all Pokemon an additional 100 base stat points, which is massive. That's the degree by which something like Kyogre is better than Silvally. But for a Pokemon like Gyarados, who already had really good base stats, these 100 points were actually distributed really well, rather than, for example, going to waste in its useless special attack stat instead, which is exactly what ruined the Mega Garchomp, by the way. Sure, Mega Gyarados didn't see any increase to its pretty mediocre speed stat, but that's where I cleverly transitioned to the next thing that made Mega Gyarados so good, and that's the move Dragon Dance. Dragon Dance is one of the best setup moves in the entire game, boosting both your attack and speed by one stage. So Gyarados didn't need an increase to its base speed stat, because Dragon Dance would already make it faster than most opposing Pokemon. Once Gyarados got a couple of boosts, it was literally capable of sweeping through entire teams with ease, especially thanks to Mega Gyarados' new ability, Mold Breaker. When it comes to Pokemon who rely on setting up and sweeping entire teams, they usually need one of two things. Either a strong priority move to allow them to move before an opponent gets a chance to attack, like Swords Dance King Gambit and Calm Mind Raging Bolt have access to, or they need a strong spread damage move to hit both opponents with a single attack. The latter is exactly what Mega Gyarados uses to sweep teams, the extremely strong 100 base power spread move, Earthquake. And that's where Mold Breaker comes in. You see, the biggest obstacle previously for Dragon Dance Gyarados was by far Rotom Wash, a Pokemon who, back in the day, was incredibly strong and on a high percentage of teams. Not only did Rotom resist both water and flying type attacks, but it was also immune to Earthquake, thanks to its Levitate ability. This all changed once Gyarados Mega evolved, because Mold Breaker allows the user to bypass opposing abilities with its attacks, meaning Earthquake would actually hit the electric type Rotom for super effective damage. But that wasn't all that changed when Gyarados Mega evolved. It also dropped its flying type and picked up the dark typing instead, allowing Mega Gyarados to actually survive electric type attacks that it previously couldn't even dream of. While Mega Gyarados did have a handful of good showings in 2018, and of course won Worlds in 2014, the reason it's only number 10 is that it didn't actually see very much success during most of the time it was legal. And if Megas eventually make their way back into the main series games in Generation 10, it's unlikely that Mega Gyarados would be very good anymore, as Gyarados has already been power crept as an offensive Pokemon and is better nowadays in a support role instead. Alright, number 9 goes to Mega Gardevoir. Mega Gardevoir had two big things going for it. The first was its Pixelate ability. This turned Hyper Voice into a really strong fairy type attack that hit both opposing Pokemon, a purely upgraded version of Dazzling Gleam. And one way I've purely upgraded my style is with my Holzkern watch. For those of you who don't know, I love wearing watches. They double as being both fashionable and practical, but are overall also very classy, which is why I reached out to Holzkern to ask them to be a sponsor. What makes Holzkern watches different from others is their use of natural materials, like wood, stone, and more, making each individual watch truly 100% unique. Holzkern sent me this newest addition to my watch collection, which I think is really cool. And if you're looking for more than just watches, Holzkern has you covered there too, with their wide selection of accessories like bags, sunglasses, and jewelry. Holzkern also provides free express worldwide shipping from beautiful Vienna, with products typically arriving in 2 to 5 business days. And as someone who lives halfway around the world in Tokyo, this is really helpful. If you're interested in checking out Holskern even further, head to holskern.com/RayRizzo and make sure to use code Rizzo for 10% off your purchase. Thanks again to Holskern for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to Mega Gardevoir. However, it had competition with Sylveon, who was also a strong fairy-type attacker, but was bulkier, and didn't require your precious once-per-battle Mega Evolution for it to acquire the Pixelate ability. The second thing Mega Gardevoir had going for it, though, was what separated it from Sylveon, and that was speed. It was significantly faster than Sylveon, which allowed it to get some big damage onto opponents before they had a chance to move. But what was unique about Mega Gardevoir was that it could control the speed of the battle as well. This was all thanks to the move Trick Room, one of the strongest moves of all time in competitive Pokemon. Trick Room could not only act as a supportive move to allow your slower Pokemon to take over a battle, but it could also use the opponent's attempts at gaining speed control against them. Over the 5 years Mega Gardevoir was in the game, it was always good, but never great. It had a number of top 8 finishes at major events, but it was never one of the most used Mega Evolutions, nor did it ever reach the peak of winning an international or a world championship. And in the present day, it's been power crept by the superior fairy-type attacker, Fluttermane. Should both Paradox Pokemon and Mega Evolutions return in Generation 10, I wouldn't expect to see much success for Mega Gardevoir, unfortunately. Moving on to number 8, Mega Manectric. This is a perfect example of exactly how Mega Evolutions should have been designed from a competitive game balance perspective. Manectric is an extremely mediocre Pokemon that has never seen any competitive usage, let alone success. Well, that's exactly the kind of Pokemon Game Freak should have been focused on making usable through Mega Evolution. Even after gaining an extra 100 base stat points, Mega Manectric still has a lower base stat total than the mediocre Goodra, Uxie, and Iron Leaves. If all Mega Evolutions would have been at this kind of power level, where they actually feel fair to play against and don't have some incredibly broken ability on top of their phenomenal base stats, then I think Megas could have remained in the game permanently just fine. But before I get to those overpowered Megas later in our list, let's talk about what makes Mega Manectric one of the top 10 Megas of all time first. Like I alluded to earlier, the big reason lies in its abilities. Manectric in its base form has the ability Lightning Rod. This is an incredible supportive ability when paired with strong water or flying types, as it protects them from one of their big weaknesses without requiring you to commit an entire move to it like Follow Me. When Manectric Mega evolves, it gains the Intimidate ability. This gives the player a lot of flexibility to Mega evolve only when the timing is right. You can keep Manectric in its base form when your water type is staring down an electric type, but if the opponent has strong physical attackers out against you instead, you can Mega evolve to gain Intimidate in order to reduce the incoming damage, Volt Switch off the field, and rinse and repeat to keep the opponent's physical attackers from ever harming you. Mega Manectric would achieve a number of top finishes, synergizing best throughout the years with Pokemon like Kyogre, Tapu Fini, and Celesteela. Because Mega Manectric is a more supportive Pokemon that does require specific Pokemon on your team in order to be effective, I can't in good faith put it any higher than the 8th best Mega of all time. But that says more about the insane power level of the Pokemon coming up than it does anything bad about Mega Manectric. Speaking of a huge power level, number 7 goes to Mega Mawile. With worse base stats than Charmeleon, it's a miracle that Game Freak was able to turn Mawile into an actual good Pokemon. Mawile did have a few redeeming qualities at least. The first being its typing. Steel and Fairy is arguably the best type combination in the entire game, with 9 resistances, 2 immunities, and only 2 weaknesses. The other is, and I said this was going to be a trend in this video, its ability Intimidate. See, Mawile is a terrible Pokemon in its base form. However, with Mega Evolution allowed, it gets to activate its Intimidate ability when it's sent into battle, and then you can immediately Mega Evolve it for the huge increase in stats before it even attacks or gets attacked. That is just massive value, especially considering Mega Mawile's ability. If Intimidate is the best defensive ability in the game, then Mega Mawile's huge power is the best offensive ability in the game, as it literally doubles its attack with no downside. But it had 2 ways to make up for it. The first is Mawile's access to one of the strongest increased priority moves in the game, Sucker Punch, which allows it to attack the opponent before they can even move. The other way for Mega Mawile to attack before the opponent moves is by using the move Trick Room. This was an incredibly common way to use Mega Mawile, and it saw numerous official tournament victories when paired with Trick Room users like Gothitelle and Cresselia. In the present day, I don't think Mega Mawile's been power crept either. I imagine Mega Mawile would still be really strong inside of Trick Room, but it could also pair really well outside of Trick Room with a Pokemon like Pal, whose damage amplification might literally turn all of Mega Mawile's attacks into one-hit KOs. Alright, I really debated where I should rank this next Mega, and I still feel like I'm ranking it too low considering its power level. But I'm putting Mega Charizard Y at number 6. Mega Charizard Y is one of a small handful of Pokemon with the Drought ability. Not only does this power up its own fire-type attacks, but it also weakens opposing super effective water-type attacks, so it's both a fantastic offensive and defensive ability at the same time. Not to mention, it can also be an incredible supportive ability when paired with Pokemon whose own ability benefits from the harsh sunlight. Mega Charizard Y's physical bulk and speed remain the same after Mega Evolving, but its base special attack stat gets an absolutely massive 50 points, which makes even Torkoal look like a joke in comparison. However, there are a few reasons why Mega Charizard didn't make my top 5. The first is that the counterplay to it is actually already pretty common. I mean, Urshifu paired with Rain Dance isn't exactly as rare as a Bigfoot sighting. Charizard is also very weak defensively, and the sheer number of Pokemon that are able to learn the move Rock Slide means that as long as you collect enough Knackley Salt and Bonsai Tears, just about any Pokemon can become a Charizard counter. The last reason has to do with Mega Charizard Y's trophy case. Simply put, while it has won a number of regional and international championships, it hasn't ever won the World Championship. And part of that lack of success also comes from Mega Charizard Y being completely unable to fight amongst the restricted legendaries whenever they are made legal, whereas all of my top 5 Megas have already proven that they can. I don't want to throw too much shade on Mega Charizard Y though. It is an absolutely fantastic Pokemon, and honestly, if Mega Charizard Y was available to use in Generation 9 alongside Terastallization and Paradox Pokemon, I have no doubt that it would have been better than a couple of Pokemon higher on this list. Coming in at number 5 is Mega Metagross. Now, if you've already seen my deep dive into Metagross's complete competitive history, you already know that Metagross, even in its base form, has amazing stats, but after Mega Evolving, it not only gets even stronger, but it gets a lot faster too, suddenly turning the tables against Pokemon like Landorus, Garchomp, and Heatran. While it only gains an additional 10 base attack points, the reason Mega Metagross becomes so much stronger actually comes from its new ability, Tough Claws, which boosts all of its physical contact moves by an additional 30%. We're talking moves like Meteor Mash, Iron Head, Bullet Punch, Ice Punch, then Headbutt, and Stomping Tantrum. You know, all the moves it already uses. And I think if Mega Metagross returned to competitive Pokemon in Generation 10, it would be one of the strongest Megas in the entire game, and likely even above some Pokemon I put higher on this list. Like, did you know Mega Metagross literally weighs as much as Groudon of all things? Well, starting in Generation 9, that actually matters, because Metagross can now learn the move Heavy Slam, which against most targets will be a 120 base power, 100% accurate Steel-type move. A move that gets boosted even higher by Tough Claws. That is a massive upgrade over its previous best Steel-type moves. However, this is a best of all time list. So while I do think Mega Metagross would be really strong even now, and it has won numerous regional and even a few national and international championships, it's never made the finals of a world championship. And these next 4 Pokemon have all won a world championship title. Starting with, at number 4, the Mega with the most world championship victories, Mega Salamence. Mega Salamence was able to capture both the 2018 and 2019 Worlds titles, showing that not only can it be the best Mega in a national dex format where the restricted legendaries are banned, but it can still be the best Mega even when they're allowed. There are a number of reasons why, so let's just start with the obvious first. Salamence gets Intimidate. Hey, I warned you guys at the beginning of this video. Now, we've already covered how good the Intimidate ability is when paired with Mega Evolution, but after Salamence Mega Evolves, it gains access to a new ability, Aerialate. This turns moves like Double Edge and Hyper Voice into incredibly powerful flying type moves, a type that, despite being a flying type, Salamence never really had access to beyond the weaker Air Slash and Aerial Ace. Speaking of its moves, Double Edge became an extremely strong physical single target nuke, and Hyper Voice could do a ton of special damage to both opponents, which made Mega Salamence really flexible in battle. And when it comes to flexibility in Pokemon, just like we've seen with Ogerpon recently, being able to do a lot of damage is nice, but being able to offer the team support as well whenever the situation calls for it is extremely valuable. That's exactly what Salamence can do thanks to its access to the move Tailwind, which controls the speed of the battle in your favor. All of this on top of Mega Salamence's high base speed stat turned it into a jack-of-all-trades type of Pokemon that was so easy to splash onto just about any team. If I made this list only taking into account how strong each Mega was last time they were legal, Mega Salamence would take the #1 spot, but to be completely honest, I don't think Mega Salamence would be nearly as good anymore. Let me explain. Mega Salamence's stat distribution is far from optimal. It does have a high physical attack, but it has no way to protect itself from opposing Intimidates, since its held item slot is taken up by the Mega Stone. And we all know that Super Smash Bros. Character, who shall not be named, is on just a couple of teams. Mega Salamence's special attack is also pretty good, but as special attackers have gotten stronger and stronger these last 2 generations, its base 120 special attack stat no longer seems as threatening. Most of the additional stats Mega Salamence gains goes to its physical defense. That's probably the worst stat for them to go to. Salamence in its base form has Intimidate, so you already have built-in protection against physical attackers. And the types that Mega Salamence is most vulnerable to, Ice, Fairy, and Dragon, are usually special attacks. The one stat that really made Mega Salamence stand out in the past, its speed, is no longer as fast relative to the newer Pokemon, as Mega Salamence can easily be outsped and one-hit KO'd by common Pokemon like Fluttermane, Chiampao, and Miraidon. But Mega Salamence having won Worlds twice, the most out of any Mega Evolution, automatically skyrockets it up my list. But the power creep it sure looks to have suffered is keeping it off the podium for me. Moving on to the top 3, I'm gonna go ahead and award the bronze medal to Mega Rayquaza. Unlike the other Mega Evolutions, Mega Rayquaza was only legal for 2 years, 2016 and 2019, but it was still able to win a world championship thanks to Wolf Glick using it brilliantly to capture the title in 2016. Mega Rayquaza has a lot of things going for it, but let's start with the most unique. Unlike the other Mega Evolutions, Rayquaza does not need to hold a Mega Stone in order to Mega Evolve. It just needs to know the move Dragon Ascent, an incredibly strong flying type move that it would already have on almost all of its movesets anyway. This allows Rayquaza to hold actually useful items and still get all the benefits of Mega Evolving. And speaking of extremely powerful moves Rayquaza has access to, it also learns Extreme Speed, the strongest increased priority move in the game that allows it to move before almost all other attacks, as well as Swords Dance, a way to boost its attack even further. And in case you didn't know, Mega Rayquaza is tied for the 4th highest attack stat in the entire game. But let's be honest, the main reason everyone uses Mega Rayquaza is its ability, Delta Stream. Delta Stream reduces the damage of any electric, ice, and rock type moves if they're super effective on any flying types on the field, including Mega Rayquaza itself. But even more important than that, it shuts down every single weather effect, which are only more common now with the introduction of Koraidon and the Paradox Pokemon. This makes Rayquaza not only an extremely powerful attacker who can hit you before you can even move, but also an anti-meta Pokemon, capable of shutting down the weather-based strategies of entire teams. But there's a reason I don't consider Mega Rayquaza as the best Mega of all time. First of all, let's go back to its base stats. Like I mentioned, Mega Rayquaza requires you to know the move Dragon Ascent in order to Mega Evolve. This, kind of by default, pushes Mega Rayquaza towards being a physical attacker rather than a special one. Well, Mega Rayquaza has an equally absurd base special attack stat, so every single one of those unused 180 base stat points will go to waste. This makes its effective base stat total, which is the sum of its stats that it actually uses, just about the same as as Calyrex Shadow Rider, who isn't even a Mega Evolution. And speaking of Calyrex, a number of troublesome new Pokemon have entered the game since Mega Rayquaza was last legal. Just to name a few, Calyrex Ice Rider is extremely bulky and can one-hit KO it. Zacian outspeeds Mega Rayquaza, resists both Extreme Speed and Dragon Ascent, and can one-hit KO it. And Fluttermane, who isn't even a restricted legendary, is faster, completely immune to Extreme Speed, and can also one-hit KO it. However, in only 2 years, Mega Rayquaza was able to capture 7 regional championship level events and 3 international championship level events, in addition to its 1 world championship title. So even if it wouldn't be as good as it once was, if it was released into competitive Pokemon again today, it would still be a very powerful Pokemon, and has certainly racked up enough first place trophies to deserve its spot on the podium. Continuing the theme of Mega Pokemon Wolf used to win Worlds, coming in as the second best Mega Evolution of all time is Mega Gengar. This thing is one of the most frustrating Pokemon you could ever go up against. And the reason for that all comes from its absolutely broken ability, Shadow Tag. Competitive players are no strangers when it comes to oppressive abilities that literally make you unable to play the game. For example, Urshifu, whose Unseen Fist ability prevents you from protecting against his attacks, has been making players put their Unseen Fists into their computer monitors for years. Well, before Urshifu even existed, we had Mega Gengar, who prevented opponents from even switching their Pokemon, one of the fundamental defensive tools players have access to. Players are able to leverage this by pairing Pokemon with the Shadow Tag ability alongside moves like Encore, Disable, and Perish Song, which have incredibly powerful effects, but effects that simply disappear once the Pokemon is switched out. Normally, this requires 2 Pokemon to pull off, like Gothitelle and Screamtail, but Gengar, as of Generation 9 at least, is able to learn all 3 of these moves. And I mentioned before how Mega Gengar existed before Urshifu ever did. Could you imagine both of them on the field together, where you can't switch and you can't protect? There's literally nothing you can do to defend yourself against them. And I haven't even talked about Mega Gengar's stats yet. It has a base 130 speed stat, which for comparison's sake is only barely slower than Fluttermane, but it also has one of the highest special attack stats in all of Pokemon. So not only can it slowly and painfully defeat you with incredibly powerful status moves, but it could also just outspeed and KO you while you can't even switch Pokemon. Mega Gengar really was not only such an unfun Pokemon to play against, but there's no denying the success that it had because of just how darn good it was. It also wasn't just a one-off winning Worlds in 2016, but it won countless regional and international championships after that, and almost won a second World Championship in 2018, where it finished second. Okay, I'm sure a lot of you guys were suspecting this, but the title of Best Mega Evolution of all time goes to Mega Kangaskhan. Yep, the Mega Evolution where all that changes is Kangaskhan's baby jumping out of its pouch and into the battle is the strongest Mega Evolution of all time. If a Pokemon has won more regional and international championships than years I've been alive, then I don't know what more I can even say about it. But for the sake of this video, I'll try. Its ability, Parental Bond, was absolutely broken. It made all of Mega Kangaskhan's damaging moves hit twice, with that second hit from the baby being at 50% power. This was essentially the same as giving it a free built-in choice band with none of the downsides. It also had the same benefit that we see from Urshifu's Surging Strikes, where you can actually one-hit KO Pokemon even if they're holding a Focus Sash. To make matters worse, Parental Bond also gives Mega Kangaskhan's moves a second chance to have their additional effects activate. This means that moves like Bite and Ice Punch have about a 50% chance of flinching and a 20% chance of freezing, respectively. Of course, this also means that a move like Power Up Punch, whose secondary effect always activates, turns into a Swords Dance that does damage. If all that wasn't enough, Kangaskhan learns some excellent moves. Fake Out is a great supportive move to immobilize an opposing Pokemon for a turn. Sucker Punch gives it an increased priority move in order to move before the opponent can even attack, and it also gets a ton of strong coverage moves, enabling it to hit almost any Pokemon in the game for super effective damage. Players most commonly used a moveset with normal, fighting, and dark type moves, which no Pokemon in the game resist the combination of. Mega Kangaskhan also has great all-around stats. It's faster than Urshifu, has more attack than Ogerpon, and is bulkier than Landorus Therian. There's a reason the K in Chalk stands for Kangaskhan, as it could literally fit into almost any team composition. Need a setup sweeper? Mega Kang's got you. Want fake out support? No problem. Whether you want a fast and offensive Mega Kangaskhan or a slow and bulky one, it's entirely up to you, because players have found success with so many different builds for it. Mega Kangaskhan was so good, in fact, that Game Freak nerfed it after just a single generation. With the release of Sun and Moon in Generation 7, Kangaskhan lost access to Power Up Punch, and the second hit from Parental Bond was nerfed to 25% of the move's power. Despite the nerfs, Mega Kangaskhan still won countless regional championships and even finished runner-up at the World Championship in 2019. And if Mega Kangaskhan returns in Generation 10, I think it'll still be one of the best Mega Evolutions in the entire game. Because, believe it or not, Mega Kangaskhan has actually been buffed since it was last legal. Crazy, I know. First, Fake Out is an even better move now than it was before, as Urshifu, who hadn't even existed yet last time Megas were in the game, takes phenomenal advantage of its support. But much more importantly is the major upgrade Kangaskhan in its base form got. See, Game Freak took notice of just how good Intimidate was in competitive play, and starting in Generation 8 with Sword and Shield, introduced a number of ways for physical attacking Pokemon to get around it. One such way was a major rework to one of Kangaskhan's abilities, Scrappy, which normally just let you hit ghost types with normal and fighting type moves. Not a bad ability by any means, as it did let Kangaskhan hit ghost types with Fake Out before Mega Evolving, but now Scrappy also prevents the Pokemon from having its attack dropped by Intimidate. This is a huge deal for Mega Kangaskhan, because if this thing returns in Generation 10, I'd predict that even the King of VGC won't be enough to slow it down. Thanks again to Holskern. Don't forget to check out the link in the description to pick up a naturally unique watch for yourself.